Welcome to the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green. This podcast is a safe place for us to have weekly discussions about mental health, Christ, personal development, and the tools to live our best lives. Please stay tuned for a new episode. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green, and this is another episode of the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the mailing list that will be in the show notes. And don't forget to share and rate the podcast. When you do that, I'm able to see if you guys are liking the content or not. I hope you guys are doing well as we are in this time of quarantine and, kind of like self-isolation at this point. So yeah, hope you guys are doing well. I know each of us are all affected by coronavirus in a different way, so hope you guys are doing well. Okay, so this week's episode is special. We are talking about the Clark Sisters movie that just came out on Saturday. If you don't know who the Clark Sisters are, they are an amazing family gospel group. They basically grew up singing. Their mom was in charge of the choirs in the Church of God in Christ Church, and they basically grew up singing as little children and turned that into their career. They were raised by the amazing Dr. Maddie Moss Clark. The movie was, in my opinion, excellent. So if you have not seen the movie, please go watch the movie before listening to this episode. I thought the movie was wonderful. I think the casting director was amazing. I think that the movie was executed well. I think that, shout out to the producers, Queen Latifah, Mary J. Blige, and Missy Elliott. They did a really great job. And I also thought it was great that the actual group is still alive today, so they could actually give their input for the movie. And also another thing about the Clark Sisters is that they are still being sampled to this day. Jay-Z and I think Beyonce's on the song, I don't know, sampled their song Higher. I forgot what song they sampled it for, but they sampled the Clark Sisters song Higher. I believe that's what it's called. So yeah, let's get into this review. This won't be a long episode today. Let me just get my notes. Okay. So there were a lot of different concepts discussed in the movie. From self-esteem to self-love, identity, codependency, balance, rejection, abandonment. All of those things were talked about in the movie. So I have about five or six different things that I want to discuss about the movie. So one of the scenes, from the beginning, it portrays, Dr. Maddie Moss Clark as a very ambitious woman, a very determined woman, and a hard worker. She was working in ministry. She was training choirs, doing workshops, things of that nature. So that required her to be away from home. And her husband, Clark, they had two conversations in the movie between Maddie Moss Clark and her husband, and he was just saying I need my wife here, there's this important dinner happening and I need you there. And she says I can't make it to that because I have another obligation to do. And he immediately says, you're useless to me, you're useless, right? Which is a powerful statement to tell anyone. And honestly, I feel like Clark, felt abandoned by his wife. I mean, I'm not saying, don't have goals outside of, personal goals. But what I'm saying is, you should have balance. If you're even if you're in ministry or just employed or whatever that you do, you should have balance, right? Your home should be taken care of before, ministry or your job qualifications. Also, another scene that displayed rejection or abandonment was when they went to go sign their record deal. Denise, she didn't look like she was about to sign it anyway. But she was telling her mom, you just left me with the scraps. You gave yourself to the other sisters, but didn't really give me anything. And, it seemed like Denise didn't feel like she was treated equally as her sisters. And at the end of that scene, Dorinda said, like, you know what, Denise, you're hard to love. And that is another powerful statement to tell your sibling, like, you're hard to love. That's a lot to, like, process, honestly. And honestly, if I was Denise, I would probably feel rejected by my own family. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would never tell someone, like, you're hard to love. Like, that's hard to process for anyone. And I also think the character of Denise, there's so many Denises in the Black church, and they don't get talked about enough. You know what I'm saying? People just see them as put a negative light on the Denises of the church, and it's like, why don't we just love on them? You know what I'm saying? Just love on them. Another thing. Oh yeah, I mentioned balance. So one thing that I do love about the Clark sisters is that they are trailblazers. They did things that were basically new to the gospel industry. Their song "You Brought the Sunshine" would play in clubs. I heard someone on Facebook say, like, they first heard "You Brought the Sunshine" when they were in the clubs and in the world. And, they also performed gospel music on national stages, and it just reminded me, like, if God can, take them to a national stage and have them sing on the Grammys and have their music be played everywhere, what do you think he can do in your own life? You know what I'm saying? If he can do that for them, imagine what he can do in your life or my life. Another thing that I liked about the movie is that Dr. Maddie Moss Clark was a pusher. Okay? She pushed Denise, Dorinda, Karen, Twinkie, and Dorinda. She pushed them. Oh, and Jackie. She pushed them to be the best that they could be as far as singing is concerned and music. She pushed them. There was a scene where they're in the recording studio and Dr. Maddie Moss Clark is like, yeah, Karen, you gonna start singing solos. And Karen like, who me, sis? And she's like, yes, you're gonna have to get out of your shell and sing solos. So they get to the scene where Karen does a solo, and all the way through that scene, Dr. Maddie Moss Clark is just pushing her, like, go, do it, giving her pats on the back. Like, you need people around you and in your circle that are going to push you to excel and push you into greatness. Another powerful scene in the movie that I loved was when I think it was a scene between Dr. Maddie Moss Clark and Twinkie, when Twinkie was about to move with her husband to North Carolina. I don't really know. And in the scene, Dr. Maddie Moss Clark says, you don't need to be pleasing me, you need to be pleasing God. And Twinkie said, I don't know the difference. I thought that was a powerful statement because, they were so focused on, music and singing and playing music and piano and organs and knowing how to do all these things. But she struggled with her relationship with God to the point where she was not able to discern God's voice and what her parents' pastor's voice was. You know what I'm saying? And I thought that was important because I think sometimes we get so focused on people's gifts that we neglect their character. We neglect their own personal relationship with God, right? Like we hype people up because of their gifts, but like, who's discipling them? Who's teaching them the word? Who's teaching them how to live, right? And what Twinkie said, like, I don't know the difference. It's not just a Church of God in Christ problem. It's a church problem. It's an overall church problem. You know what I'm saying? and it goes to show that our identity needs to be rooted in God. Everything we need to do, everything that we do needs to be rooted in the Lord, in scriptures and prayer. It needs to be rooted in that, because without it, you have nothing. Another important thing to mention, this will be the last point, is suffering in silence. Either you're suffering in the Black family or you're suffering in silence in the Black church. And in both instances, it can become deadly when you're suffering in silence. So there was definitely different scenes, like the scene where Twinkie was crying after her mom's funeral, right? It looked like she had a nervous breakdown, because the next scene was her in the hospital. So it looked like she had a nervous breakdown. Another scene was when Dorinda, this is after mom passed, Dorinda was leaving the hospital, and Jackie's like, can you come and see Twinkie, make sure she's okay in the hospital? And Dorinda's like, no, I can't do it. And then the next scene, Dorinda looks like she's about to commit suicide, or like contemplating jumping off the bridge, whatever bridge she was on. It seemed like she was contemplating doing that. It didn't seem like she, told her sisters what she was feeling or experiencing. So one thing I want to just tell you guys, that you do not have to suffer in silence. There are too many resources out here to help you, that you do not have to suffer in silence. And if you are one of my listeners who is suffering in silence and needs help or assistance or whatever, please email the show's email address and I will email you back with resources. I'll do the best that I can to help you find someone that you can talk to, because you shouldn't have to suffer in silence. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes we suffer in silence because we're afraid of the guilt and the shame that comes along with speaking up, right? We get so caught up in the shame and the guilt that we don't say anything. But what I do know is that when you do speak up, it's such it's a freeing experience when you speak about what's going on, right? We have to speak up when something is wrong. Tell somebody, anybody, just speak up when something is going on. Because I'd rather you be free than be in torment. I'd rather you be free than be suffering, right? There's no need for you to suffer, right? And I think sometimes people suffer in silence because they don't know who to go to. They don't know who to ask for help. Or they don't think the person that they're going to ask for help is going to take them seriously. There's so many reasons why people suffer in silence, right? There's so many reasons. But there is a power and there's a freedom in speaking up and saying, hey, I need help, right? Like, what would have happened in that movie if Twinkie, instead of having a nervous breakdown, said, you know what, I need help? Or what if Dorinda, instead of before going to that bridge, what if she told her sisters, like, hey, you know what, I need help? At some point in our lives, we all need help. So I really enjoyed that movie. It was really good. I really learned a lot about the Clark sisters. I learned a lot about Dr. Maddie Moss Clark. It was a great movie. I think that the church world was on display through that movie. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I might do a part 2 next week of how I felt about the movie. I might have to watch it again to do a part 2 though. But I hope you guys have a great week.